It's 2024. It's almost been a full term that Joe Biden has been in office. We've watched millions of illegals flowing into America, and we've seen crime rates increase because of it. Along with deadly drugs hitting the streets, we've also seen millions of US dollars going to Ukraine. And more importantly, we've suffered the cost of high prices due to Biden economics. The cost of living, gasoline, and groceries are at an all-time high. It's become very evident that under Biden, inflation has taken a toll on US citizens, and we're at a boiling point, unsure of how much more of this we can all take. We know Trump was the true victor of the 2020 election. It's become increasingly evident that rogue forces within the government have tried to destroy America by taking down Trump. They've continued at full speed over the last 4 years, yet no matter how hard they hit, they miss. No matter how hard they try, they fail. Since Biden has taken office, they've arrested Trump, tried him in court, and even tried to assassinate him. Yet no matter what they try to do to take him down, God won't let it. Trump is still commander-in-chief. That's what part 1 of this film is all about. In America, she's going through radical change. It may not be evident to the untrained eye, but before we know it, it'll become common knowledge that the America we are headed toward will be unlike any America we've ever known. In protecting the essential functions of our government via devolution, Trump essentially left the keys to the car for the corrupt deep state as they continued to dismantle the United States from the inside out. This was necessary, and by design, symbolically, the keys he left were to a car with no engine. From the outside, they may appear to have power, but truly, internally, they are powerless. Trump is still commander-in-chief, despite the 2020 election results. The clues are all left in military laws and orders, such as the Military Justice Act, Executive Order 13818, 13848, and 13912. Basically, everything we've covered in the first part of this film series. But let me refresh your memory. When Trump became president, he would need the aid of the world to eradicate the swamp effectively. And to get this sort of power, he went on a tour to the world's most powerful nations and did what he does best: negotiate. This is why the military chose him. With the many nations involved in corruption and via Space Force insight, we had everything. This was the leverage for Trump to make other nations capitulate. In other words, they bent the knee. So, when it comes to getting rid of the deep state, one must realize that to drain the swamp, one must kill the dollar. What this film seeks to cover is what the first film didn't explore, and that is the dangers of our centralized banking system, the plan that Trump and the military have set forth in order to replace it, and the Roaring '20s will soon be celebrating as the largest transfer of wealth Earth has ever seen is on the horizon. We'll also go through key assassinations and attempts on US presidents, including Trump. We'll explore how corrupt the central banking system truly is, and we'll cover key events in our history that led to rocket-high inflation. We'll timeline the sequence of events that led from 9/11, the housing market crash, the inception of crypto, the birth of XRP, the founding of the BRICS alliance, Trump's Quantum Initiative Act, the quantum financial system, and ultimately NAJVEዓ. This is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. You turn this off, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You keep watching, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. Follow the yellow brick road, the path to prosperity. Like all great tales, symbolism is deeply interwoven into the fabric of stories. At face value, audiences can view a rather shallow presentation in a story. That is until the story continues to play out. That is when hidden messages begin to sprout into our consciousness. Therefore, Follow the Yellow Brick Road from The Wizard of Oz is more than just a whimsical line from a beloved story. It's a metaphorical guide to economic stability and prosperity rooted in the gold standard. Many theories suggest that L. Frank Baum's story, written at the turn of the 20th century, subtly critiques the financial systems of his time and advocates for a return to the gold standard. The Yellow Brick Road then becomes a call to return to a system where money is backed by gold. offering a stable and trustworthy financial foundation. Where Dorothy's journey to the Emerald City symbolizes the quest for financial security and prosperity, the Emerald City, with its green color, represents the ultimate goal of financial security and wealth. The idea of following the yellow brick road to a gold-backed currency system is seen by some as a pathway to a brighter, more secure financial future. It's a vision where monetary value is transparent and grounded in something real and enduring. So, when you hear "follow the yellow brick road," think of it as an allegorical journey towards economic stability and prosperity, guided by the enduring value of gold. This film is subtitled Yellow Brick Road for that reason. To those paying attention, we have been living in a movie set. And just like in the book or the movie, what we see at face value isn't exactly what the story is about. Coincidentally, the yellow brick road is the perfect analogy for the film we are watching unfold right before our eyes. This film, and the world's. The world is going under radical shift, and to keep the public from scrambling into sheer chaos, the military needed to find the perfect director for this movie. And you can bet they did. They chose Donald Trump. And if you think the last 8 years have been wild, buckle up. We aren't in Kansas anymore. Act 1. Going down, 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 down. So suddenly like no, I never did give nothing to the tin man. From Abraham Lincoln, JFK, Reagan, and to Trump, what they all had in common is that they stood in the way of the private banks and paid a heavy price for it. For some, it was their lives. What many fail to realize is that the deep state is directly connected to the centralized banking system that has created an intricate and difficult to understand means of printing and lending money. Because if the average American understood the complex inner workings of our monetary system, they would revolt. They would become outraged. They would realize they'd been cheated, enslaved, and conned by a small group of bankers in tandem with the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. It's almost a given to assume that, like Lincoln, JFK, Reagan, and Trump understood the dangers of our centralized banking system, and regardless of the outcome, they tried to do something about it. During the Civil War, Colonel Dick Taylor proposed a revolutionary idea to President Lincoln. Instead of borrowing money from the banks at high interest rates, the U.S. Treasury could issue its own currency backed by the nation's economic output. This led to the creation of greenbacks, a fiat currency declared legal tender by Congress in 1862. Despite initial challenges and oppositions from banks, greenbacks financed military efforts, infrastructure projects like the Transcontinental Railway, and sparked rapid economic growth. The British, fearing America's prosperity, were worried about Lincoln's financial policy. Tragically, Lincoln's assassination in 1865 led to the abandonment of the greenback. Not long after, the U.S. was placed under the Crown with the 1871 Organic Act. The bar was quickly established thereafter, and what we knew as the U.S. Constitutional Republic became a corporation. What the military and Trump are doing now is bankrupting and dismantling that corporation. In essence, they are killing the Federal Reserve System by first killing the dollar. When done, they'll have taken us back to 1865, so to speak. This is why some have theorized that Trump is the 17th president, or why Q is 17. Because Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president, and every president since then became the president of the U.S. as a corporation, not the constitutional republic. Thereafter, the deep state took necessary measures to ensure another Lincoln would never happen. To secure a centralized banking system well into the future of America, the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 created the Federal Reserve System, establishing a central banking structure in the U.S. Attempts had been made prior to establishing a secure centralized banking system throughout American history, such as in 1791 with the First National Bank. After that charter expired, the Second Bank of the United States was created in 1816. G. Edward Griffin, author of Creature from Jekyll Island, explains what the Federal Reserve actually is.
The Federal Reserve System is a strange creature. It's easier to say what it is not than what it is. Most people think it's a government agency. It is not. Those who have studied it say, well, wait a minute, this is a private banking corporation. You almost get half credit for that, but it's not really a private corporation either. It's a hybrid. And to make it more complicated, we can say it is a cartel. This is the amazing thing. The Federal Reserve System is a banking cartel. It's no different than a banana cartel or an oil cartel or the sugar cartel. It just happens to be a banking cartel. It's a group of very large and powerful private banking interests who have gotten together in a cartel arrangement, and they brought the federal government into it as a partner in order to use the force of law to enforce the cartel agreement. You see, with most cartels, if a member of the cartel wants to break out or violate the agreement, if they fix prices, for example, and one of the members of the cartel wants to raise the prices contrary to the agreement, there's no way for them to discipline the member of the cartel and force him to stick with the agreements. But if you bring the government into the arrangement and convert the agreement into law, now all members are required by law to keep the agreement or they go to jail. So this is why cartels always, throughout history, have always tried to form a partnership with the government, whatever government is in the locale where they operate. And so we come to the amazing conclusion that the Federal Reserve System is basically a cartel, a banking cartel, that has gone into partnership with the federal government of the United States so that the federal laws can be used to enforce the cartel agreement. Now, that's a real shock. It was to me because, you know, when I started in this process of research, I thought, like most people, that the Federal Reserve was an agency of the government and that it was formed to protect the people, to protect you and to protect me and to stabilize the economy and to make sure that we didn't have much inflation or unemployment or all these bad things. And you know, when the chairman of the Federal Reserve comes before Congress or before the television cameras and he's asked to explain why they raised the interest rates this month or why they lowered them or whatever they did, the chairman always says, well, we did it for you folks. We did it in order to cool down the economy or to stimulate the economy or to create more jobs or whatever. It's always expressed in terms of, we did it for you folks. It wouldn't go too well if they said, well, we really did it because it helped the banks. People would say, what did he say? You know, but you can imagine the head of the banana cartel saying, well, why did you raise the price of bananas this month? Well, we did it for you folks to make sure that, that there would be enough stimulus in the economy that we would always have bananas. You see. Anyway, back to the question. What is the Federal Reserve System? It is a cartel, and it's a hybrid organization. There are very few like it in existence. It seems to have some of the characteristics of a government agency because the government is involved. And it seems to have some characteristics of a private corporation because it's actually owned by private banks. But it's neither of the two. It's a hybrid. And when it comes to ownership, for example, the member banks actually own the Federal Reserve System, but those certificates of ownership do not carry the usual prerogatives of ownership. For example, the banks can't sell the shares. If you can't sell something, you don't really own it. And they can't even vote for their board of directors, you see. So what's this ownership business? It's merely a kind of a facade. It's a name. It's a word they give to it. Well, it's owned by the banks. But in reality, it is really a hybrid. It's a cartel that operates under the protection of the federal government. And the government has given it a monopoly, a virtual monopoly, to create the nation's money supply. Now, I have no doubt that the members of the Federal Reserve System, the banking cartel, want to see the economy as strong as possible. They don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. But you can be sure that when there is a conflict between the advantage of the cartel or the purposes of the nation at large, there has to be no choice. They always go for the purpose of the cartel because that is who they are. That is who employs them. That's where their money comes from. That's the reason for being. Now, the purpose of the Federal Reserve System really is to protect the large member banks from competition and to preserve their profit margins. And as we've seen in late, when some of the banks get into trouble, the purpose of the Federal Reserve System comes to the fore, which is to pass on the losses of the banks to the taxpayers. They do this through Congress. Generally, remember, Congress is a partner with the Federal Reserve System. And they go to Congress and they say, well, the banks are in trouble. Now, we don't want the banks to fold because that would be bad for the economy, right? That would be bad for you folks. And so, since it's for you folks that we're doing this, the congressmen kick in the extra money to bail out the banks, to guarantee the loans, to guarantee the interest payments from the countries that are going bankrupt and can't make their interest payments to the bank and so forth, whether it's Mexico or China or Russia or some country in Africa or Asia. They cannot pay, so they come to Congress. Congress says, we'll pay for them. And it seems like it's a humanitarian thing, when in reality, all they're doing is transferring tax dollars from you and from me to these countries so they can continue to make interest payments to the banks, so the banks don't have to write off these loans as bad loans. So that's another purpose of the Federal Reserve System, is to pass off the losses of the cartel members to the taxpayers. Most people don't realize that, but when you see how it has operated over the years, it's very clear. Purpose of the Federal Reserve System is to promote the best interests of the banking members of the cartel. So what we have here is a banking cartel which has gone into partnership with the federal government, and they've used this cozy relationship so that the government has given the banks the power to create the nation's money supply. The banks now, these private banks, have the monopoly over the nation's money supply. And that's not too shabby a deal.
Alexander Hamilton, a founding father of the United States and the first Secretary of Treasury under President George Washington, realized the importance of a centralized banking system for the U.S. Although many U.S. presidents have opposed central banking, such as Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, and John F. Kennedy, when JFK took office as President of the United States in January 1961, he inherited an economy that was experiencing a period of slow growth and challenges.
The present state of our economy is disturbing. We take office in the wake of 7 months of recession, 3.5 years of slack, 7 years of diminished economic growth, and 9 years of falling farm income. Business bankruptcies have reached their highest level since the Great Depression. Since 1951, farm income has been squeezed down by 25%. Save for a brief period in 1958, insured unemployment is at the highest peak in our history.
Executive Order 11,110, issued by JFK on June 4, 1963, authorized the Secretary of the Treasury to issue silver certificates against silver bullion, effectively bypassing the Federal Reserve's authority to control the money supply through issuing currency. This order aimed to increase the supply of silver-backed currency in circulation. The same day, Kennedy signed H.R. 5389, repealing the Silver Purchase Act of 1934, eliminating a tax on silver transfers and allowing the Federal Reserve to issue $1 and $2 bills alongside existing notes. In short, JFK moved power back into the Treasury and away from the Federal Reserve. If the Treasury could issue its own money, backed by silver, the deep state would have another Lincoln on their hands soon. And that's why many believe Executive Order 11,110 to be the reason JFK was assassinated.
The third indispensable element in building the new prosperity is closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of one international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Richard Nixon took the United States off the gold standard on August 15, 1971. This action is often referred to as the Nixon shock. Nixon announced the suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold, which effectively ended the Bretton Woods system of international financial exchange and moved the U.S. to a system of floating exchange rates. When Ronald Reagan took office as President of the United States in January 1981, he inherited a struggling economy characterized by high inflation, high unemployment, and economic stagnation. Eventually, Ronald Reagan would almost meet the same fate as Kennedy and Lincoln.
Ronald Reagan believes government causes inflation, not business, not labor. In the 1960s, the federal government decided to stop tying the value of the dollar to gold, which permitted them to print as much money as they wanted to spend. And that's why we've had this crippling inflation. We'll never regain price stability until we restore some form of gold backing to the dollar. As president, my first priority will be to make the dollar the most trusted currency in the world.
So, if we return to the gold standard, the banks wouldn't have the ability to print money out of thin air. By now, you could guess why that put a target on his head. The private bankers associated with the Federal Reserve were making massive profits. Therefore, Reagan was a threat. And even though their assassination attempt failed, it shook Reagan to the core so much that the gold standard policy on which he ran on would never get accomplished. It appears that Reagan got the message, as even the public realized the trajectory of his presidency had shifted.
If we're going to stop inflation, we must do it now, not with bigger government. It takes better government. That's what we owe ourselves and our children. That's why I'm running for president.
Only one man has the proven experience we need. Ronald Reagan for president. Let's make America great again.
That leaves us with President Trump. The deep state has tried again and again to discredit and slander him.
Bringing back impoundment will give us a crucial tool with which to obliterate the deep state, drain the swamp, and starve the warmongers, these people that want wars all over the place, killing. They love killing. And the globalists out of our government. We're going to get the warmongers and the globalists out of our government. With impoundment, we can simply choke off the money. This policy is anti-inflation, anti-swamp, anti-globalist, and it's pro-growth, pro-taxpayer, pro-American, and pro-freedom. I alone can get that done. I'll get it done, and I'll make America great again. Thank you very much.
They tried him in court. It didn't work. They tried to kill him. That didn't work either. When the military chose Trump to be the man that would change the tide of our financial establishment, they knew he had the power and the courage to face the inevitable difficulty in taking down the deep state. Trump has criticized the Federal Reserve in the past, and he has also expressed his desire to integrate the U.S. Treasury to the Fed in order to provide more checks and balances on his bond purchases. He recently announced at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville that he would fire the head of the SEC immediately upon taking office.
Let it grow. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman. I didn't know he was that unpopular.
More importantly, the Fed has much to worry about regarding cryptocurrency, which is rapidly taking hold of the world economic system, mainly because many cryptocurrencies are finite, meaning there is a cap to how many coins there are. This brings intrinsic value to a coin, which can be traded digitally without banks intervening. A cryptocurrency like Bitcoin will only ever have 20 million in existence. No new Bitcoins can be mined or created after that number is achieved. This hard limit on the total supply of Bitcoin is a key feature of Bitcoin's monetary policy, designed to create scarcity and prevent inflation. Trump has supported crypto and even accepts cryptocurrency donations. Trump has been vocal about his stance against CBDCs, stating,
Tonight, I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
Cryptocurrency is made possible by utilizing a ledger on a blockchain, which can never be erased or edited. A blockchain ledger is a decentralized distributed digital ledger that records transactions across multiple computers in a way that ensures the security, transparency, and immutability of the data. Take into consideration, future companies like Meld Gold will be backed by gold and will also be used on the XRP ledger system. XRP being a lightning-fast crypto that much of the world is adopting into its systems as we speak. We'll cover more on that later. But are we starting to see more reasons why the deep state wants Trump dead? To drain the swamp means to kill their power. To kill their power means to kill the dollar. Can you see the steps unfolding that will finally make this possible? On Trump's capitulation tour, with a little help from his friends, he negotiated deals with other nations, ultimately paving the way forward to ensure a successful financial reset, not just for the United States, but for the world. What does a successful financial reset imply? Killing the dollar and allowing a phoenix to rise from its ashes. What this film is meant to show you is what that phoenix looks like. Through a timeline of events, this film will explain the dangers of centralized banking, fiat currency, and inflation, and it will do so by exploring key takeaways from 9/11, the 2008 housing market crash, the birth of crypto, and the founding of the BRICS alliance in 2009, to the birth of XRP in 2012, and the Quantum Initiative Act of 2018, and what's to follow because of it. We'll revisit key moments of the capitulation tour, all to explain further the efforts and success of Trump, our military, and a budding world alliance, BRICS, in taking down the US dollar. And lastly, we'll cover the arrival and implementation of the quantum financial system. And with it, we'll understand that a hopeful future for Americans and citizens of the world is on the horizon. Don't just blindly believe what is to be shown here. Let it guide you. And by doing your own research, you will earn the reward of understanding and will be better able to explain this to your peers. And the hope that you had forgotten will return in greater strength than ever before. Buckle up, enjoy the ride. By the end, you'll realize yet again why they call this the greatest show on earth. Act 2, the greatest secret on earth. One of the greatest dangers of a centralized banking system outside of the US government is that private bankers own our money supply and therefore have direct control of the US economy. A more dangerous factor is a centralized banking system that operates on fiat currency, monopoly money. That's because of the dangers of inflation. You ever wonder why the price of basic commodities keep rising every year, yet salaries and hourly wages don't? That's inflation. To fully understand what I mean, and to learn precisely how the Federal Reserve works, and ultimately to see how you and I have been enslaved into a matrix we are unable to even see, I've decided to present you with Mike Maloney's outstanding presentation of the inner workings of the pyramid scheme known as the Federal Reserve. For the next 20 minutes, feel free to pause when needed, to take notes when desired, because the more you realize the truth about this banking system, the more sense this film will make, and the more desire you'll have to share this knowledge and to demand a repeal of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Knowledge is power, and with great power comes great responsibility. Understanding this film will greatly impact your ability to respond effectively.
They say that money doesn't grow on trees, but the truth is that the modern banking system creates currency far faster than trees can grow. Most people don't have a clue how currency is created. Economists and bankers make it sound so complex that people think they can't understand it. But I'm going to strip our monetary system down to its essence so that you can see the scam behind the curtain and just how it affects you. Every modern society creates currency in pretty much the same way. But since the US dollar is the majority of the world's currency, I'm going to use the United States as our example. It all starts when some politician says, "Vote for me and I'll make sure the government provides you more free stuff than my opponent will." But there's no such thing as a free lunch. So to provide that supposedly free stuff, the politicians vote for the country to spend more than its income. This is called deficit spending. To pay for that deficit spending, the Treasury borrows currency by issuing a bond. So what's a bond? If you think about it, a bond is really nothing but a glorified IOU. It's a pretty piece of paper with numbers printed on it that says, "Loan me $1 trillion today, and I promise over a 10-year period I'm going to pay you back that $1 trillion plus interest." But what you need to understand is that Treasury bonds are our national debt. These glorified IOUs are to be paid back by you and I and our descendants through future taxation. Therefore, when the government issues a bond, it steals prosperity out of the future so that it can spend it today. The Treasury then holds a bond auction, and the world's largest banks show up and compete to buy part of our national debt and make a profit on it by earning interest. You'll notice that as we move through this process, the big banks are there, taking a cut every step of the way. This isn't by chance, as you'll see shortly. Then, through a shell game called open market operations, the banks get to sell some of those bonds to the Federal Reserve at a profit. To pay for the bonds, the Federal Reserve opens up its big old checkbook and writes bad, bogus, counterfeit checks that should bounce because they're drawn on an account that always has a zero balance. There isn't one penny in there. To quote from the Boston Federal Reserve, "When you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover that check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money." The Fed then hands those checks to the banks, and at this point, currency springs into existence. The banks then take that currency and buy more bonds at the next Treasury auction. But what is a check? A check is also an IOU. When you write a check, you're making a note that says, "Here's my IOU for cash. All you have to do is go to the bank and pick it up." Now, it's very, very important that you understand this process because we're going to come back later and show you the devastating effect this has on you. The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. The Federal Reserve and the government mistakenly call it base money because they didn't watch episode 1 of this series and they don't know the difference between money and currency. But I will correctly refer to it as base currency because it is not money. It is currency, and as we've learned, there is a big difference. Money has to be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power over long periods of time. We learned in episode 1 that earlier in our history, our paper currency was just a claim check. It was a representation for real money of intrinsic value, the gold and silver that was held on deposit at the Treasury. You could walk into any bank and slap your currency, like say a $20 bill, on the counter and redeem it for real money, a $20 gold piece. But now, this base currency that's piling up back here is really nothing but a receipt or a claim check on an IOU, that bond. So it's really nothing but a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the newly created currency into the various branches of the government, and the politicians say, "Hey, thanks for that." And the government does some deficit spending on public works, social programs, and war. The government employees, contractors, and soldiers then deposit their pay in the banks. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but when you deposit your currency with the bank, you're not actually depositing it into an account to be safely held in trust for you. Instead, you're actually loaning the bank your currency, and within certain legal limits, they can do with it pretty much anything they please. This includes gambling in the stock market and loaning it out at a profit, of course. Now this is where the machine of currency creation really gets cranking, because this is where something called fractional reserve lending comes into play. Fractional reserve lending is exactly what it says. The banks are allowed to reserve only a fraction of your deposit and loan the rest out. Although reserve ratios may vary, I'm going to use a 10% reserve ratio as our example. If you deposit $100 in your account, the bank can legally take $90 of it and loan it out without telling you. The bank must hold $10 of your deposit in reserve just in case you want some of it. These reserves are called vault cash. But why does your bank account still say you have $100 if the bank has stolen $90 of it? Because the bank left IOUs it created, called bank credit, in its place. Now I know this sounds crazy, but here it is in black and white from the Fed. Commercial banks create checkbook money when they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in accounts on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. These are nothing but numbers that the banks type into their computers. And even though these bank credit IOU numbers are very different from base currency numbers, because they only exist in computers, they are still currency. So now there is $190 in existence. Now the reason people take out loans from the banks is to buy something. They're going to buy a house or a car or something like that. So the borrower takes the $90 that the bank loaned to him from your account, and he pays the seller of the item. But then the seller deposits that currency into his account, and his bank loans out 90% of that and leaves bank credit numbers in its place. So now there's $271 in existence. This process repeats and repeats until under a 10% reserve ratio, an initial deposit of just $100 can create up to $1,000 of bank credit, all backed by $100 of vault cash, just 10%. But as I said, reserve ratios vary wildly. On some deposits, it's 10%, on others, it's 3%, and on some forms of deposits, reserve requirements are 0. The result is that the expansion of the currency supply by the banks is far greater than even this example would lead you to believe. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact, 92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created not by the government, but here in the banking system. Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1. That the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from. The true definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply is nothing but a couple of bucks whipped up in this hocus-pocus scam where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve swap glorified IOUs, and a bunch of numbers that the banks just type into their computers. That's it. That's our entire currency supply. It's nothing but a supply of numbers. Some of them printed, most of them typed, and there is nothing else. But if you thought that was crazy, get ready to enter the twilight zone of modern economics. We work for some of that currency supply. True wealth is your time, but we trade away moments of our lives, hour by hour, day by day, and year by year, for numbers that somebody printed on pieces of paper or just typed into a computer. Now those numbers represent our blood, sweat, tears, labor, ideas, and talent. We are what gives the currency its value. But here comes the really cruel joke. We work hard so that we can save some of that currency, so that we can pay the tax collector in the United States, it's known as the IRS. They then turn it over to the Treasury so that the Treasury can pay the principal plus interest on that bond that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. Now let's do a recap on this section, because this is where the system begins to rob you and I on a massive scale. Much of our taxes are not used for schools, roads, and public services, but to pay interest on bonds that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. The Federal Reserve is committing fraud. But here's one of the biggest secrets of them all. Before the establishment of the Federal Reserve, there was no need for personal income tax. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and that very same year, the Constitution was amended to allow income tax. Do you really think this was just a coincidence? Ask yourself how much income tax you've paid over your lifetime. Much of it has been silently siphoned away into the hands of those who own the system. Yes, this system has owners. Who they are is an even bigger secret that we'll get to shortly. But first, we need to understand the mumbo-jumbo of the so-called debt ceiling. It's all based on a huge paradox. There was interest due on that bond, and there was interest due on every one of those loans that the banks made. That means that there is interest due on every dollar in existence. Let me ask you something. If you borrow the very first dollar into existence, and that's the only dollar that exists on the planet, but you promise to pay it back plus another dollar's worth of interest, where do you get the second dollar to pay the interest? The answer is that you have to borrow that one into existence and promise to pay it back with interest as well. So now there are $2 in existence, but you owe $4, and so on and so on. The result is there's never enough currency to pay the debt. There is always more debt in the system than there is currency in existence to pay the debt. Therefore, the whole system is impossible. It is finite. It will come to an end one day. What would happen if the government stopped borrowing to do deficit spending? Are the payments on those treasury bonds going to stop? What would happen if the public stopped borrowing and going deeper into debt? Are your house and car payments going to stop? No. There is a payment due every month on the principal plus the interest on every dollar in existence, and those payments do not stop. If we stop borrowing, then no new currency is created to replace the currency that we used to make those payments. Whether you're making a payment on a loan or paying tax to make a payment on a bond, the portion of the payment that goes to pay off the principal extinguishes that portion of the debt. But the debt also extinguishes the currency. Currency and debt are like matter and antimatter. When they meet, they annihilate each other. If we just pay off the principal only on all the loans and bonds that exist, the entire currency supply just vanishes. So if we don't go deeper into debt every year, look what happens. The whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse under the weight of those payments. Politicians and pundits alike talk about balancing the budget, paying down the debt, and living within our means. They don't understand that that is deflationary. It is impossible to do under our current monetary system without collapsing the whole economy. This is why any talk of a debt ceiling is not only ridiculous, it's delusional. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt just to continue. And that's why politicians will always kick the can down the road and raise this so-called debt ceiling over and over again until the whole system finally collapses under its own weight. In other words, they don't want it to collapse on their watch. The founding fathers of the United States knew the dangers of central banking and fought to free themselves from this very thing. The Revolutionary War started out as a tax revolt, but now we must pay tax just to have a monetary system. Having just suffered through the hyperinflation of the continental dollar, which was printed into oblivion to finance the Revolutionary War, they understood the dangers of fiat currency and debt-based monetary systems. So to protect future generations from institutional theft and out-of-control government, they wrote into the Constitution that only gold and silver can be money for the simple fact that you can't print them. Our current system is not only unconstitutional, but it robs us of the liberty and prosperity our forefathers fought and died for. We are all feeling the effects of ignoring the Constitution right now. By forcing more currency into circulation, our purchasing power is diluted. Inflation is a slow and insidious stealth tax that is simply the result of this debt-based monetary system. This system empowers and benefits those who create the currency and receive it first, as they get to spend it into circulation before it has an effect on the economy. They're stealing purchasing power from you and transferring it to the banks and the government every hour of every day because of this false monetary system. And it's not like the people at the top don't know this. To quote the Federal Reserve, the decrease in purchasing power incurred by the holders of money due to inflation imparts gains to the issuers of money. This is a fraud. It is a pyramid scheme, it is a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam, and it's a lie. Our entire monetary system is nothing but a form of legalized theft. But here's the biggest con job of them all. The Federal Reserve is not federal, it has stockholders. There is no federal agency that has stockholders. What's a stockholder? A share of stock represents a percentage of ownership in a corporation. So the stockholders are the owners of that corporation. Therefore, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation with owners. And you can see it for yourself if you go to the Federal Reserve's website, and it will say, the stockholders receive an annual dividend of 6%. Now, we know that the stock in the Federal Reserve was originally issued to the largest banks in the United States. But because of mergers and acquisitions through the years, you can't actually trace who owns the stock in the Federal Reserve. That's a very closely guarded secret. My guess would be that the owners are those primary dealers, the banks that get to make a profit by selling part of our national debt, those bonds, to the Federal Reserve, who buys them with a check from nothing. Then we pay tax to pay the principal and the interest on those bonds so that the Federal Reserve can pay the banks a 6% dividend. Don't be alarmed if you don't quite comprehend the deception of this system at first glance. Very few people do. It is purposely complex. The economist John Maynard Keynes once wrote, "By this means, government may secretly and unobserved confiscate the wealth of the people, and not one man in a million will detect the theft." I believe that presented correctly, anyone can understand this system, regardless of how complex it is. So let's do a recap and break it down even more. The way the system works is that, step 1, the government creates glorified IOUs. These bonds increase our national debt and put the public on the hook to pay it back. Step 2, IOUs are swapped to create currency. The Treasury sells the bonds to the banks. The banks then turn around and sell our national debt at a profit to the Federal Reserve, which they probably own. The Federal Reserve then opens its checkbook that doesn't have a penny in it and buys those IOUs with IOUs that it writes, checks, on a checking account that has a zero balance. Then they give those checks to the banks and currency just springs into existence. And then the whole process repeats. This results in a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury, which is really just a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the numbers in the various branches of the government, and we get to step 3. The government spends the numbers on promises, public works, social programs, and war. Then the government employees, contractors, and soldiers deposit their pay into the banks, and we get to step 4, where the banks multiply the numbers by magically inventing more IOUs through fractional reserve lending, where they steal a portion of everyone's deposit and lend it out. That currency gets redeposited, and then a portion is stolen again. And the process repeats over and over, magnifying the currency supply exponentially. Then we work for some of those numbers, which brings us to step 5, where our numbers are taxed. We pay tax to the IRS, who then turns our numbers over to the Treasury, so the Treasury can pay the principal plus the interest on bonds that were purchased by the Federal Reserve with a check from nothing. Then we get to step 6, the debt ceiling delusion. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt and will eventually collapse under its own weight because politicians always kick the can down the road. They don't want it to collapse on their watch. And finally, step 7, the secret owners take their cut. The world's largest banks own the Federal Reserve. Those banks make a profit selling our national debt to the Fed. They make a profit when the Fed pays them interest on the reserves held at the Fed, and the Fed pays them a 6% dividend on their ownership of the Fed. This system is fundamentally evil. It funnels wealth from the working population to the government and the banking sector. It is the cause of the artificial booms and busts of modern economies, and it causes great disparity of wealth between the rich and the working class. And it is only possible because we no longer use real money, we use currency. But worst of all, it is a form of enslavement. Bond is the root word of bondage. Whenever a government issues a bond, it is a promise to make us pay tax in the future. Nobody asked you if you wanted to pay tax today for the prosperity we all enjoyed in the last century. Nobody is asking our children if they want to work hard in the future to pay for the prosperity we're enjoying now. George Washington once wrote to James Madison, "No generation has the right to contract debts greater than can be paid off during the course of its own existence." By stealing prosperity from tomorrow so we can spend it today, we enslave ourselves and future generations. Now, this all sounds pretty bad, but there is great hope, for you are the greatest threat to this false monetary system. This system relies on the public being ignorant of its workings. Please share this knowledge with everyone you know, because an informed public that fully understands the system can build a better future for generations to come. And now I leave you with this quote, widely attributed to a former director of the Bank of England. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in inequity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. But if you want to continue as the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money and to control credit. This is the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. It's located on Constitution Street, and that is just as much of a joke as the New York Fed being located on Liberty Street. Both of them are unconstitutional, both of them limit our liberty, and they transfer wealth away from us every second of every day to the Federal Reserve, to the government, and to the banking sector. You are now among the 1 in a million who can detect the theft of your prosperity. So the big question is, what can you do about it? 1, watch this video until you can describe and teach it to others. Those who understand this system can make preparations for its unavoidable collapse and protect themselves. History shows that those who don't will probably be wiped out. 2, share this video with everyone, especially those you care about. All it takes is a mouse click or two to get this message in front of millions. Post this video on Facebook, tweet it, email it to loved ones. Please share it wherever you can. 3, join the conversation. The current world monetary system is based on a 300-year-old design meant to enrich a few at the expense of the many. There must be a better way. At hiddensecretsofmoney.com, we've created an open-source platform for the design and development of a new world monetary system. We're calling on every economist, every student, every college, every bright mind, and anyone who cares to join the discussion. In educating ourselves and each other, we can prevent the further loss of our freedoms and maybe, just maybe, win some of them back.
Now you can see the importance of repealing the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It's completely unconstitutional and a direct means to enslaving the public into a system they have zero clue about. Act 3. The beginning of the end. Centralized banking combined with fiat currency eventually leads to massive inflation, and that's all that's needed to kill an economy. But if you combine that with the greed of evil men, the inflation grows out of control and the collapse of a society can be assured, leaving just a few to profit from a completely destroyed America. So, over the last 2 decades, a deep state plan to destroy America from the inside out had rolled out until the military stepped in. Let's have a look at how it began.
We are having some technical difficulties, which is totally understandable when you try to do, ad hoc reporting and getting information to you as fast as we possibly can and making sure that it's accurate at the same time. So
Donald Trump is on the line.
Indeed.
We know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan. And of course, Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Well, I have a window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it. And even, I think, worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone, and it's just hard to believe.
There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Both buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that there was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
The domino effect to take down America started with 9/11. We all know 9/11 was an inside job. The immense greed that permeated George Bush Jr.'s administration almost destroyed America for good. The obvious signs that this was planned include Larry Silverstein's purchase of insurance on the buildings just prior to the collapse, Building 7 collapsing with absolutely no sound reason, and to note, in demolition fashion, the Twin Towers falling as well in demolition fashion, to the missile, not airplane, being shot at the section of the Pentagon that was in charge of finance investigation. 9/11 was a psyop, a psychological operation to MKUltra the masses into giving up their civil liberties willingly. Have a look at this letter written for President Trump from Scott Bennett, a U.S. Army Psychological Operations Officer who worked in the U.S. Central Command's Joint Interagency Operations Center. Dear President Trump, as a military officer and also contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton, I was assigned to the Joint Interagency Operations Center at U.S. Central Command, where I identified, tracked, and reported on terrorists, their financial donors, networks, banks, and activities. Part of my mission was to investigate, discover, and expose all acts of waste, fraud, and abuse by Terrorist Financing Operations Director Dov Zekheim, who was my senior supervisor. It was known that Dov Sekheim had secretly arranged for $2.3 trillion to be misappropriated through Pentagon channels when he had been the Pentagon comptroller. I was assigned the task of penetrating Dov's terrorist financing operations, which involved his son, Roger Zakhan, who was a lawyer at the House Armed Services Committee, an Iraqi named Abdullah Aziz, with close ties to Rudy Giuliani, and the law firm Covington & Burling. The auditors investigating this matter were conveniently killed in a missile strike upon the Pentagon Office of Naval Intelligence on September 11, 2001. This missile strike was concealed as a plane attack, which was a deception operation. I briefed your attorney, Michael Cohen, about these matters in 2015 and 2016, which may be one of the reasons he has been targeted by deep state shadow government loyalists. Evidence and expert testimony confirm, without a doubt, the attacks on September 11, 2001 against the Pentagon, as well as the World Trade Center and the Solomon Building in New York, were a well-planned, well-financed psychological operation, false flag attack on American soil, designed to trigger and manipulate the American people, the Congress, and the U.S. military into a full-scale war mobilization posture with the intent of overthrowing, scattering, and remaking the Middle East and Africa for the direct political, cultural, and economic benefit of the Zionist State of Israel. 9/11, although seemingly coherent, has led to a multi-trillion-dollar nightmare for Americans. Because of your success in attacking the deep state with your sealed indictments and other measures, and because of the failure of the DNI, CIA, FBI, and DOJ Russian hoax, as well as great fear that your forthcoming summit with Vladimir Putin will be a great success, I fear for your life and pray for your safety. You are our chief law enforcement officer, not just our commander-in-chief. It is my hope that this memorandum, combined with the other memoranda you are receiving from other informed patriots, will be helpful to you during the Helsinki summit, where I and many others hope that you and President Putin will share intelligence on 9/11, who did it, how they did it, and why they did it, face to face. I believe that your leadership in placing the truth about 9/11 before the public will finish the job of taking down the deep state and the shadow government. It will help you shut down the pernicious Zionist Saudi penetration and subversion of the U.S. economy, government, and society, and it will help you demonstrate to the larger public, most of whom did not vote for you, that under your leadership, the U.S. government can be trusted to clean house and tell the truth. Very respectfully, Scott Bennett. It's imperative to understand what Bennett means when he writes, 9/11 was a well-planned, well-financed psychological operation, a false flag attack on American soil. Maybe it was financed by the Pentagon's missing $2.3 trillion, and so well planned, they destroyed all the evidence of it. This is why Building 7 collapsed and a missile was shot at the Pentagon. Designed to trigger and manipulate the American people, the Congress, and the U.S. military into a full-scale war mobilization posture with the intent of overthrowing, scattering, and remaking the Middle East and Africa for the direct political, cultural, and economic benefit of the Zionist State of Israel. If Bennett writes that the war was for the political, cultural, and economic benefit of the Zionist State of Israel, then maybe the private owners of the Federal Reserve are directly tied to the Zionist State of Israel. It would make sense that they've already infiltrated our government to influence policy changes in their favor, wouldn't it? Have a look at how many members of Congress have dual citizenship with Israel. This would mean the direct economic benefit of the Zionist State of Israel means the direct benefit of the private owners of the Federal Reserve banking system. Let me explain further. Bennett mentions the Middle East and Africa. This correlates to Iraq in the Middle East and Libya in Africa. Remember from Act 1, they will try to kill anyone who stands in their way. Saddam Hussein was planning to introduce a gold-backed currency in Iraq, while Muammar Gaddafi was planning on rolling out a gold-backed currency in Libya. These plans directly challenged the dominance of the US dollar in the global oil market. The idea was that Iraq, under Saddam's regime, and Gaddafi, under Libya's, sought to trade oil in a currency other than the US dollar, possibly in euros or a new gold-backed dinar. What did the deep state do when they perceived this threat? In the case of Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, the CIA infiltrated the minds of their public to turn on their leader. They bought and paid for terrorist extremists to lead the opposition against their competition.
As news of Saddam Hussein's execution spreads across the globe, reactions within Iraq are mixed. Many Iraqis watch the execution on television. Afterwards, some celebrated in the streets. In the Baghdad slum of Sadr City, some paraded an effigy of Saddam hanging from the front of a truck. But much of how Iraqis feel about the execution depends on their tribal loyalties and whether they're Shia or Sunni.
Muammar Gaddafi killed this morning when rebel forces overwhelmed his hometown of Sirte. Sirte was the last bastion of resistance against the rebels who toppled Gaddafi 2 months ago.
Look at Libya. Look at Iraq. Iraq used to be no terrorists. He would kill the terrorists immediately. It was like, now it's the Harvard of terrorism. Iraq. If you look at Iraq from years ago, I'm not saying he was a nice guy. He was a horrible guy. But it was a lot better than it is right now. Right now, Iraq is a training ground for terrorists. Right now, Libya, nobody even knows Libya. Frankly, there is no Iraq and there is no Libya. It's all broken up. They have no control. Nobody knows what's going on.
The world would be better off with Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi in power.
100%. As far as Assad is concerned.
What about the human rights abuses?
Well, you don't think they're happening now? They're worse now than they ever were. People are getting their heads chopped off. They're being drowned. Right now, they're far worse than they were ever under Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. I mean, look what happened. Libya is a catastrophe. You look at our ambassador as an example, okay? Libya is a disaster. Iraq is a disaster. Syria is a disaster. The whole Middle East. And it all blew up around Hillary Clinton and around Barack Obama. It all blew up.
Are you starting to realize who the deep state is? This is who took over America from the inside out and are now fighting to survive against Trump. Some would say Trump loves Israel, but if anyone knows how to use a trump card, it's Donald. So in their attempts to stop their competition, they inadvertently created more problems at home. Their greed for power ruined our economy. In 2000, the U.S. debt was $5.5 trillion. By the end of George Bush Jr.'s presidency, it had doubled to $10 trillion. At that time, it was the largest increase in U.S. history. Obama broke that record and saw another $10 trillion added. For comparison, under Bill Clinton, the debt increased by only $2 trillion. And from 1985 to 1992, it only rose $2.24 trillion. Under Biden, the debt has also increased by $10 trillion, just like Obama. But while under Trump, it only grew $3.4 trillion. Today, the U.S. debt stands at a total of $35 trillion, owed to the banks that own the Federal Reserve. More debt means more currency created by these private bankers, leading to more inflation and higher prices. Eventually, the economy will collapse under its own debt burden when people struggle to pay for basic commodities like houses and cars. Every president raises the fictional debt ceiling because they don't want the economy to crash while they are president. Although the more debt we go into, it becomes certain inflation will crush the economy at some point. It's a Russian roulette, and if they keep playing, eventually the bullet will fire and kill. Upon looking at these stats, it's no wonder the collapse of the dollar is imminent. In the last 20 years, we've gone up $25.8 trillion in debt. Let's put that into perspective. From 1980 to 2000, the U.S. national debt increased by about $4.8 trillion. Compare that to the last 20 years. From 2003 to 2023, the U.S. national debt increased $25.8 trillion. How did the debt increase so much and so quickly? 9/11. The far-reaching effects of 9/11 started a chain of events leading to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which circled back home in the form of rising oil prices, which led the Federal Reserve to lower their interest rates. This pumped a lot of money into the economy. More money, more inflation, more defaults on loans. Also, the federal debt was increased in 2005 from lack of resources to respond and recover to Hurricane Katrina, leading to billions of dollars in damage. Hurricane Katrina, to be sure, was not caused by 9/11, but it wouldn't have caused so much damage, financial and humanitarian, had we not diverted our resources to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Wars specifically started to end gold currencies from rolling out. Like Katrina, the 2008 financial crisis would not have been so severe had our response to 9/11 not set the stage.
It was one of the most profound events in generations with huge consequences for the American economy and households throughout the country. This was the time when the financial crisis erupted, a crash that most experts did not foresee.
While the Fed's monetary policy between 2002 and 2005 helped mask the economic toll the wars were taking on the economy, it engineered a housing bubble that led to a consumption boom. As we all know, that bubble burst by September 2008. One of the outcomes of increased money circulation in the economy, coupled with low interest rates, was that the banks could attract home buyers by offering adjustable rate mortgages with initially low interest rates. However, the Federal Reserve couldn't sustain these low rates indefinitely. When rates began to rise from 2005 onwards, mortgage payments followed suit. This led to defaults, which eventually devastated the banks and called for the bank buyout. The Troubled Assets Relief Program, or TARP, was the government bank buyout, which cost taxpayers $230 billion. TARP allocated $700 billion to purchase distressed assets, particularly mortgage-backed securities, and to inject capital into banks and other financial institutions to prevent their collapse. During this time, the stock market saw a $7.4 trillion decline in value. With $10 trillion in debt and counting, did we reach a pivotal point of no return? I believe this is when the military stepped in and developed a plan to fix it. Do you see why the military chose America's most successful businessman to lead the operation of saving not only the American economy, but the world's? Does it make sense that the military and Trump allowed Biden to cheat the 2020 election? Did they allow for the inevitable death of the dollar to happen under their watch? The wars created by the false flag operation we know as 9/11 had an echo effect of increasing debt for that decade and the ones to follow. This, without a doubt, accelerated inflation toward an economic crash. It appears the goal was to bring the American public down to its knees, into a state of dependence upon the federal government. That is why the left is pushing for socialism in America.
Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
So to recap, the deep state private bankers tied to the state of Israel, who quite possibly own the Federal Reserve, thrive and benefit from war by driving government borrowing. This leads to the inevitable economy crash, which leads to a further divide between the poor and the elite, reducing the chances of anyone taking their power away. How do we break this cycle? We need to repeal the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. But being that our government has already been heavily infiltrated, this wasn't going to happen straightforward. Therefore, the military stepped in, and to ensure the survival of the United States, its constitution, and economy, I believe they invented a solution, a means to decentralize banking. And just 4 months after the housing market crash, on January 3rd, 2009, Bitcoin was born, the world's very first cryptocurrency. This is why some people believe cryptocurrency was created as a covert military operation, starting with Bitcoin and leading into XRP, which we'll cover soon. Cryptocurrency was invented in 2008 with the creation of Bitcoin by an anonymous individual or group using the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. When we reflect upon the damaging effects of the Federal Reserve banking system and the inflation that has since followed, despite central banking's claims, inflation remains unchecked, evident with prices outpacing wages. Central banking is no longer working. Its damaging effect on our economy has reached its zenith, and it will soon be obsolete. What's the best way to decentralize banking? Crypto. How does crypto prevent inflation? It's in limited supply, it's decentralized, and it's independent. Limited supply. Cap supply prevents inflation driven by excessive money printing. There can never be excess crypto created beyond its capped limit. Just like gold or silver, there is a finite supply on Earth. For example, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. Decentralization. Crypto is immune to government manipulation and censorship. Independence. Crypto is detached from national economies, avoiding political and economic disruptions. Isn't it genius? Cryptocurrency offers an escape from the worldwide dollar dependence. But how could it be implemented to the rescue? The birth of crypto and Bitcoin preceded the creation of BRICS, an alliance of nations promoting economic independence from the US dollar. If they used cryptocurrency as a bridge currency between their economies, they wouldn't need to use the dollar as the trade currency anymore. Now you're starting to get it. Just 5 months after the birth of crypto, the BRICS alliance was founded.
The leaders of the BRICS nations are forging a multi-billion-dollar financial alliance. The world's top 5 emerging economies agreed on Tuesday to establish a development bank to rival Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and the World Bank.
Leaders of the so-called BRIC countries get ready for their first formal summit tomorrow in Russia.
2009, BRICS alliance founded. After studying the BRICS alliance and its growth over the last 15 years, it's clearly influenced by the white hat plan to take down the deep state fiat banking system. Allow me to explain why. Hegemony, leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. The US dollar has served as the world's leading reserve currency since World War II. Today, the US dollar currently represents around 58% of the value of foreign reserve holdings worldwide. This figure reflects a gradual decline over the years, as the US dollar's dominance has decreased due to central banks diversifying their reserves into other currencies such as the euro, yen, renminbi, and now cryptocurrency. It wasn't until 2009 that this informal club solidified into a platform to challenge the dominance of Western powers in global affairs. Spearheaded by Russia, BRICS aimed to provide a united voice for the so-called Global South. Without U.S. hegemony, the alliance may have never desired to unite. That is to say, if the U.S. wasn't the bully of the world, they'd have no need to fight back. BRICS has set its sights on transforming the global economic and geopolitical landscape. The bloc focuses on economic cooperation, multilateral trade, and development initiatives. BRICS operates within a consensus-driven framework, and all member countries also belong to the G20. This dual membership empowers BRICS to channel its collective influence into regional and global platforms. As of 2024, around 59 countries have shown interest in joining BRICS. Many nations looking to align with BRICS to reduce their dependence on the US dollar and strengthen economic cooperation through the use of local currencies and alternative financial systems. This interest reflects a significant shift in the global economic landscape. As the new alliance continued to develop, the world of crypto evolved just as much. In understanding how the world's countries move money, it's imperative to understand the old archaic way of doing so, and how XRP, not Bitcoin, will lead the charge into the realm of new.
This reset will be a huge shock when Americans catch on. That's why the average person won't hear a word about the story until it's obvious to just about everyone. That's why if you're going to invest, I'd recommend you do it right now, today. And I found a small company at the center of it all. They're building the bridge between the legacy banking world and a new financial system. This firm recently bought the assets and the intellectual property to build what could become one of America's first government-accepted stablecoin networks. This company is going to become the leading firm powering the global payment system going forward. It has the intellectual property, technology, and the engineering expertise to launch a global payment system that handles every single currency from every country that's going to be faster, easier, and more cost-effective than every existing solution. We are right on the verge of a once-in-a-generation opportunity to profit by investing in the companies that are building out the architecture for this massive shift. We're also about to see massive changes in the $23 trillion world of big finance. The central banks around the world are planning to go digital. Many of the legacy banks you've heard of, where you probably even keep your money, like Bank of America, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, they're about to be reset, overhauled by a new type of technology called fintech, which is short for financial technology. Financial technology is revolutionizing the $23 trillion old guard banking industry. But yeah, I got to remember, the central banks and the folks on Wall Street, they want to keep this transformation under wraps for as long as they possibly can. This reset will be a huge shock when Americans catch on.
An international XRP transaction typically takes only a few seconds to a few minutes to complete. Ripple, the company behind XRP, designed the XRP ledger to facilitate fast and efficient cross-border transactions, significantly reducing the time and cost compared to traditional banking systems like SWIFT. Key features of XRP transactions include speed, cost, reliability. Speed. Most XRP transactions settle in approximately 3 to 5 seconds. Cost. Transaction fees are very low, often fractions of a cent. Reliability. The XRP ledger can handle a high volume of transactions, making it a robust solution for international transfers. Efficiency is one of the reasons XRP is often considered a viable alternative for cross-border payments and remittances. And when you realize who is already involved with XRP, the dots start connecting. And in between the lines, you can start to question, was Ripple and XRP a military operation to rid the world of U.S. hegemony?
Why do I hold XRP? Because Ripple's the chosen one to lead the new global digital payment system, and they use XRP. In 2013, the Federal Reserve began looking for faster payments options. 2 years later, an action plan was born and a federal payments task force was created. It included one company focused on crypto. Ripple. In 2014, the World Bank and Better Than Cash Alliance, which includes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative, and the governments of 32 countries, put out a report called The Opportunities of Digitizing Payments. 1 year later, the Better Than Cash Alliance featured one crypto company on their website, Ripple. Today, Better Than Cash Alliance and all other UN initiatives are focused on a single agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. You can see the SDGs logo on Bill Gates' lapel, world-leading companies, the Better Than Cash Alliance website, and on the UN's official exchange, Exchange. What crypto is Exchange officially utilizing for their carbon credit solution? XRP. The world will move to a new international standard for exchanging electronic messages between financial institutions by 2025 called ISO 20022. Who was the first ISO 20022 member focused on distributed ledger technology? Ripple, who's partnered with over 300 financial institutions, including Bank of America, American Express, PNC, Santander, SBI, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Bank of England, India, Singapore, Scotland, Australia, and Indonesia, the largest banks in Japan, Canada, Egypt, the Middle East, United Arab Emirates, Thailand, Morocco, Bhutan, South Korea, Brazil, and Latin America? Ripple, who is a former employee overseeing the Federal Reserve? Ripple, a former employee overseeing the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock's digital asset division. Ripple, leading Australia's CBDC effort. Ripple, who hired a former Treasury of the United States. Ripple, 2 former Federal Reserve attorneys to their board. Ripple, 2 former Clinton and Obama advisors, former Minister of Defense and Economics of Germany, former business director at Swift, former Swift board member, former CFO of PayPal, former head of the DTCC, former chief business officer at Uber, former VP of Amazon, and former SEC chair on their legal team. Ripple, who's a member of the Digital Pound Foundation, Digital Dollar Project, Digital Euro Association, Mojaloop, IMF's High-Level Advisory Board on FinTech, Hyperledger Blockchain Consortium, Open Payments Coalition, Faster Payments Council, Global Payments Steering Group, Cross-Border Working Group, International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications, Crypto Climate Accord, University Blockchain Initiative, World Wide Web Consortium, and a featured partner of the World Economic Forum with 3 members of their team directly listed on the WF website. Ripple. Now, does Ripple and XRP sound like they're going to disappear, or do they sound like they're part of a much bigger plan? You decide.
XRP has taken center stage following Russia's confirmation of the ambitious plan BRICS has to develop a new independent payment system. This move to adopt a cryptocurrency would trigger a massive jump in price of XRP, which at the time of this film stands around 60 cents a coin. CEO and founder of Cryptonaires, Robert Doyle, believes that XRP's price may reach $10,000 if BRICS countries adopt it widely. There is a general opinion that member countries in BRICS stand to gain so much from choosing XRP as their alternative to the United States dollar. Now can you see why investing into XRP is a good idea? Very soon, if not already, XRP's value will skyrocket to drastic measures, in similar fashion to what happened with Bitcoin during 2017. Bitcoin's price skyrocketed from around 1,000 in January to nearly 20,000 in December. Can you also see why the SEC sued Ripple? The SEC filed a lawsuit stating Ripple was selling XRP as a security. Ripple argued that XRP is a digital currency, not a security, which affects how it would be regulated, traded, and used. The case has been ruled in favor of Ripple. Ripple won, setting a standard for all cryptocurrencies and ensuring not only its survival, but its dominance on the US and world stage. Now it's time for Ripple and XRP to grow as they were intended. So how could this look? It's 2015. BRICS has grown. XRP is in existence. The tools for a financial restructure have been created and laid out. And now that the BRICS alliance was forming, I believe the White Hats understood one day post-death of the dollar, to ensure the survival of our nation, they'd need to join BRICS. My theory? Trump had everything on all these countries and used it as leverage in many ways, one being trade. Fulfilling his promise to create the level playing field, maybe XRP was created all along to facilitate the death of the dollar and propel us into a new financial world. When Trump became president during the capitulation tour, he visited the first 4 nations of the BRICS alliance. I believe this is why Trump was chosen, as he would be equipped with the outstanding negotiation skills to get the rest of the world on board.
Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
The reason Trump was so well received by all these countries is because they had already been in talks about leveling the playing field and making it fair. Trump was the man for the job, and the gift he brought to the rest of the budding nations was XRP and the death of the dollar. Act 4, The Road to Awe.
I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field. That's the only way that you can fairly compete.
Trump speaks with the core 4 of the BRICS nations. One of Trump's first stops on the capitulation tour included a visit to China's Xi Jinping. When Donald Trump became the first foreign leader to dine in the Forbidden City since the founding of modern China, many of us wondered why. Maybe the BRICS alliance knew that Trump was on board. Maybe China treated him as a king because he was bringing back opportunity to all nations of the world by supporting BRICS. Could Trump have been negotiating a way out of U.S. hegemony, working with China to cooperate in a plan that would eliminate the deep state? The following year, he visited Helsinki and had the famous soccer ball exchange with Putin. President Putin smiled and handed the ball over to Trump and said, "Mr. President, I'll give this ball to you. And now the ball is in your court." Reports only 10 days later would suggest that Putin handed over a soccer ball with a transmitter inside of it. Transmitters are devices or systems used to send signals or data from one location to another. What sort of information do you think Putin was sending Trump? The timing says everything. Trump visits 2 of the biggest founding BRICS countries, who are also the 2 largest superpowers of the world after the United States, then returns home the same year to pass the Quantum Initiative Act. So what is the National Quantum Initiative Act? Also known as H.R. 6227, the Quantum Initiative Act is an act to provide for a coordinated federal program to accelerate quantum research and development for the economic and national security of the United States. The act represents a strategic investment in quantum technology, which has potential applications in various fields, including computing, cryptography, and materials science, with the goal of maintaining U.S. leadership in this rapidly evolving area. While the National Quantum Initiative Act focuses on advancing quantum science and technology broadly, its implications for cryptography and, by extension, cryptocurrency are significant. The Act's efforts to advance quantum research could lead to developments that impact the security and functionality of crypto systems. In regard to the capitulation tour, isn't it starting to look like Trump was negotiating for the future of America by providing the technology necessary for BRICS to thrive, and by also ensuring the negotiation of the United States' entrance into the BRICS alliance? All a worthwhile strategy in accomplishing Donald Trump's biggest promise, draining the swamp, ending the deep state, giving America and the world a level playing field. 1 year later, Brazil's President Bolsonaro would visit Trump at the White House. Another member of the BRICS alliance would spend time with Trump. Reports state the 2 committed to building a new partnership between their countries with the focus on increasing prosperity, enhancing security, and promoting democracy, freedom, and national sovereignty. Could it be this meeting included talks about the U.S. joining BRICS and how we could further ensure the success of it? And a year after that, Trump would visit the last country from the core of the BRICS nations, India. The visit jump-started ties between the world's 2 largest democracies, which at the time had been strained under trade tensions.
Mata ki India-US friendship, long live, long live. India-US friendship.
They certainly talked about the U.S. joining BRICS.
India-US friendship.
As the capitulation tour ended, it became clear that Trump was taking military technology to the heads of the BRICS nations in order to equip the rest of the world with the proper tools to detach from the financial claws of the U.S. deep state. Is it becoming clear why the military chose Trump to be president and commander-in-chief? The U.S. dollar's dominance is decreasing on a trend that predicts the future of international trade. a future where the dollar is at a level playing field. Within the capitulation tour, there was the trade tour. The trade tour had stops when Trump visited Asia, the EU, and Africa, all in between the capitulation tour stops.
I had a very, very good conversation, as most of you know, yesterday with the president of China. It was a very, very warm conversation. I think we are on the process of getting along very well, and I think that will also be very much of a benefit to Japan. So we had a very, very good talk, and we are working on that as we speak. I believe that will all work out very well for everybody. China, Japan, the United States, and everybody in the region. As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. And we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair. And we want to have a fair trade deal, and we're looking to have a fair trade deal, and hopefully we can work something out. Over the years, the United States has been losing hundreds of billions of dollars with the European Union, and we just want it to be a level playing field for our farmers, for our manufacturers, for everybody. And we also want a big beneficiary, frankly, to be the European Union. So we think it can be good for everybody, and that's what we're here to discuss. Mr. President, thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's all about money. Money is power. It's all about creating a level playing field. It's about removing financial monopolies. This is why Trump passed the Quantum Initiative Act in 2018 and put $1.2 billion into funding the advancement of quantum technology over the following 10 years. So what will it all lead to? What will it finally look like? Act 5, the quantum financial system in Asara Jasara. When inflation hits the U.S. to a point of no return, when the dollar dies and is in need of a rising phoenix from its ashes, there will be a plan. There will be a replacement. Here's where it gets exciting. With so many resources going toward quantum initiatives, there has been much speculation about the future of our world, particularly when discussing the QFS. The quantum financial system might be more than a futuristic idea. It could be the key to a revolutionary new financial era. Imagine a global network powered by quantum computing and blockchain, offering unparalleled security and fairness. This system could eliminate the inefficiencies and corruption of the old financial world, creating a transparent, equitable financial landscape. The QFS might even pave the way for radical reforms, like abolishing debt and promoting global prosperity. In the QFS, there is no Federal Reserve, there isn't an IRS. The clause of the financial system created by the deep state ceased to exist. While the full details remain speculative, it's exciting to think that the QFS could democratize financial power and open doors to a more just and prosperous world. In fact, by looking at the structures of technology and alliances already established in our world, some would say the QFS is already here. But the entire rollout is still happening before our eyes. Technology like XRP will fuel the QFS. Imagine XRP being integrated into the QFS, enhancing its ability to handle instant low-cost transactions across the globe. XRP's design, optimized for speed and scalability, aligns with the QFS's goal of creating a seamless, transparent financial system. XRP could be at the heart of a transformative financial system that reshapes global finance and democratizes economic power. The speculation about whether the BRICS nations will be part of the quantum financial system adds an intriguing layer to the conversation. As the QFS aims to overhaul global finance with advanced technologies, the BRICS countries' emerging powerhouses seeking to challenge the traditional financial order might already be the key players in this transformation. The BRICS nations are already pushing for a multipolar financial system, often advocating for alternatives to Western-dominated financial institutions. If the QFS is as revolutionary as some believe, it aligns perfectly with the BRICS nations' goals. Imagine these nations leveraging the QFS to create a new inclusive financial ecosystem that rivals traditional power structures. To millions around the world, the writing is on the wall. BRICS and XRP are the QFS. When the time comes, the U.S. will join BRICS and will seal off the deep state from any future in our financial system. This is why alliances are being formed with the companies that rule the world. They have to bend the knee in order to continue to play the game. The master negotiator was given the task by God. That master negotiator is Trump. Could all this have been set into motion by what is known as NAJVEዓ and ZEMLJI? In the 1990s, a piece of legislation known as the Farmers' Claims Act was introduced. It aimed to address financial injustices faced by farmers due to the mismanagement and corruption in the agricultural sector. While it was a specific, targeted piece of legislation, it became a symbolic touchstone for broader reform movements. As the story goes, the principles behind the Farmers' Claims Act, fairness, debt relief, and economic justice, caught the attention of reformers and visionaries. They began to see these principles as a foundation for something much larger. This led to the development of NAJVEዓ and ZEMLJI. So what is NAJVEዓ exactly? NAJVEዓ, or the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, was a proposed U.S. law that some say was signed into action by Bill Clinton. It includes a wide range of proposed changes to come after exposing the fraudulent system created by the Federal Reserve. It includes eliminating the Federal Reserve, abolishing income taxes, and implementing a new financial system. The date for its initiation was first October 11, 2001. Considering the events of 9/11, the act was halted from getting rolled out. The economic reform promised under NAJVEዓ includes forgiveness of personal, corporate, and government debt, introduction of a new U.S. currency potentially backed by precious metals, abolition of income tax replaced by national sales tax, changes to federal government structures and processes, and reforms aimed at increasing transparency and reducing corruption. The same type of act was created on a global scale, replacing national with global. ZEMLJI, Global Economic Security and Reformation Act. ZEMLJI is an extension of NAJVEዓ on a global scale, proposing similar reforms but affecting international financial systems and economies. The proposed reforms are as follows: elimination of national debts worldwide, introduction of a new global financial system potentially involving changes in currency and banking practices, initiatives to improve global living standards and address poverty, efforts to create a more equitable global economy. So, could the act actually have rolled out behind the scenes? Was there military intervention throughout the last 20 years in slowly rolling out the technologies to ensure the success of it? When you connect the dots of inflation, war, crypto, XRP, BRICS, Trump, the capitulation tour, the trade tour, the quantum initiative, and the QFS, is it starting to make sense? A radical worldwide shift is on the horizon. Many truth seekers have different opinions on this, but the truth is, it fits into the Quantum Initiative Act. and it balances the playing field. Considering we've been lied to, cheated, and enslaved by the central banking system for over the last 100 years, a revaluation of money, a financial reset, so to speak, would allow for reparations to be widely spread throughout the United States and the world. For a new world to replace a broken financial system, new technology, building, testing, and implementation had to occur to ensure the success of what was to follow. In many sectors of our community, people find this all easy to disregard because it's been a theory for so many years. But can't you see, by simply observing what's happening geopolitically, the theory is now coming to life? The technology and alliances are catching up? I know what some people might be thinking. If I can't see it, it's not real. And if I can barely pay for groceries, how am I expected to believe in all this? You aren't, but with an open mind and willingness to look into all these topics, you'll find a new hope is truly on the horizon. Millions will watch this film and agree this is our inevitable future. This documentary is for you. Use this as a tool to share with those in doubt. Use it to help explain to others how we got to where we are and how we're getting to where we're going. Just like Dorothy, who symbolizes America, found her way to Emerald City, following down the yellow brick road, we too are on our way to radical prosperity. Along the journey, it gets difficult to believe that there is an end, a final destination. There are setbacks, there are fears, but nothing can stop what's coming. What's interesting to note in L. Frank Baum's original book, Dorothy's shoes are actually silver. However, in the 1939 film, the shoes were changed to ruby red. Following the lines of symbolism, red is the color of blood, and for 100 years more, it appears the path to our prosperity cost us blood, sweat, and tears. That's not God's way. That's greed's. If Dorothy had silver shoes while walking the yellow brick road to Emerald City, then Baum's hidden meaning behind the Wizard of Oz shines brighter than ever before. True financial freedom, fairness, and abundance will be had once we return back to the gold and silver standards. In this film, we explored what's happening, not just within the US, but also the world outside of it. We've explored key moments of our past that led to our present, and key moments of our present that are leading us into a prosperous future. With so much inflation, war, and deception, the public are feeling more on edge, more anxious and combative, especially as we get closer to the US election. What if, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, things had to be this way? What if it's true? The best is yet to come. Can a Michelangelo sculpture be made without a mess? What if the future holds so much promise, yet we've been too distracted or blind to see? It's appearing more and more that the information surrounding the collapse of the US dollar and the emergence of a new worldwide financial system appears to be sound, reasonable, and essential in realizing the future we are heading toward. To some, it might be scary, and to others, it may bring abundance, as we are certainly heading toward the greatest transfer of wealth the world has ever seen. But to us, it means the greatest show on earth continues. Is it starting to make sense why the Biden administration is sending so much money to Ukraine? Why Trump allowed the Biden administration to steal the election? And why so many military flights have been to Gitmo and back? The entire show we've been watching has been orchestrated with much care to prevent the collapse of society and to ensure a smooth transition into a completely new world of finance. The largest transfer of wealth is here, and to those paying attention, there stands an opportunity for you to create massive generational wealth in this new budding digital gold rush. The death of the dollar is imminent. The economy has already crashed. It's just catching up to us. But when it dies, do remember, there is a new system waiting on the horizon. The future of our world will no longer be in the hands of a few elite bankers. Their time and power is quickly ending. Fairly soon, if not already, the world will never look the same. And if you didn't realize it yet, you are Dorothy. Everyone watching this film needs to realize that you are walking down the yellow brick road. The Tin Man represents the industrial world. The Scarecrow represents the farmers. And the Lion represents the politicians. And Dorothy represents us.
There's no place like, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place.
We've been on the road to prosperity for some time, and after we reach Emerald City, we'll be home again. Like Dorothy in the film, we'll awaken and realize there's no place like home.
There's no place like home.
We'll have recognized the world we've lived in for more than 100 years was built upon the minds of a few greedy, evil men. We'll have realized the systems of control they implemented to enslave the economies of the world are now self-imploding. Quantum technologies have provided the world with the means to prevent inflation and corruption, bringing home to all nations a level playing field. It's now common knowledge the dollar alone must collapse for the world to prosper together. No matter how rocky it gets, let this be a reminder that every powerful ending leads straight to a greater beginning.